All right, welcome everyone. So glad to have you here. If you're attending live, if you're watching this later, thanks for tuning in and taking a look. Today, we are going to go through a webinar. We're going to be talking about launching your GPS support group, talking about the nuts and bolts and details, and I think you'll get a lot of useful information as we move through today. So just a quick note about some of the people we have partnered with in the past. We like to say thank you to the organizations that we have worked with. Lots of different folks on here. You might recognize some of them. You might be working with some of them. And these are just some of our partners, and we're constantly working with new communities and new organizations. And so if you see something familiar on there, you'll know that we have done some partnering with them in the past. When we get started now today, I'm going to have Nelly Willis, our amazing program director, introduce herself, and then I will introduce myself, and we will start moving through the material. So we can click through, and Nelly will introduce herself. Nelly?
Well, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Nelly Willis, and I am GPS Program Director. I am also the Director of GPS en Español. Oh my gosh, this is a great list of things. I am GPS Master Trainer, and I co-developed GPS en Español training. I started with GPS in 2018. And I started my first GPS support group in person the same night that I attended the training. And it's a pleasure for me to be here. And yeah, so thank you all for being here.
Yay. Thanks, Nelly. I added at the bottom of Nelly's bio that she is a lover of flowers, because I know this about her, that she loves bright and colorful flowers and has a passion for new mamas.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Nelly, for all your support. Here's a little bit about me. I have been working with the GPS model for over 12 years. I'm a GPS master trainer, and I currently work with GPS doing their facilitator development. So I do a lot of training with them, one-on-one coaching of our facilitators and coaches and training team. At this point, I have done a little bit of math, and I think I've facilitated at least 2,000 group sessions. And some of the groups that I've facilitated for are things like postpartum moms. That's where I started. I've done groups for parents of transgender kids, heart-centered entrepreneurs, anti-racism and solidarity groups, birth trauma, miscarriage and pregnancy loss, nurses on the front lines during the COVID pandemic, and many others. And I included that list just to give you an idea of all the different ways we can use the GPS model and the vast number of communities that I personally have gotten to support. And then I've trained people who are doing even more work with more communities. My current work brings a lot of art and poetry to the group space. I run groups called Seeds of Connection and really help people move more deeply into their own healing and growth journey. I am a huge believer in the magic of peer support and group work. I've watched it change lives throughout the time I've been facilitating. I've watched it help people move through mental health challenges more quickly or with more support. I've watched people become agents of change in their own lives. I got to hear from an attendee of one of my original postpartum moms groups who told me that attending that group was part of what helped her feel confident enough to become an IBCLC, which is a body feeding, breastfeeding support person. Another attendee who reached out a few years ago and told me that attending that postpartum group frequently through some years actually gave her the courage to leave an abusive relationship. And another really fun thing I got to see when I was supporting new moms in Kitsap County, Washington, we saw a person who was getting married. Her partner was in the military. They were just throwing something together, and she was a little sad to not have a wedding. And our support group banded together and loaned her a wedding dress. Somebody baked her a cake, and they made a beautiful wedding in the park. And so I just love how these groups can really bring communities together and connect us in really cool ways. And it's changed me. I give advice less. I embrace imperfection more. I've become a better listener. I'm a better parent. I'm a better partner, friend, and a human. And I really live now with the belief that we are all doing our best from moment to moment with the tools we have. I fully and wholeheartedly embrace my inner weirdo now. And I love bringing fun and creativity and joy to the work I do. And so hopefully as we move through the material today, you'll do some learning and we'll have some fun together. Just so you know, we will have time at the end to do some Q&A. I will be moving through the material without checking your questions right now, but you're welcome to put them in the chat and my support team will capture those. We'll come back to them and we'll also have time at the end of this webinar to take some questions. So next, just giving you an idea of why group peer support feels that social support is so important. We know that it's the first line of defense in mitigating trauma, in treatment for substance use disorders, mental health challenges, and transitions of any kind. And the GPS group model is being implemented in programs nationally and internationally. We just wrapped a training. I just had a meeting yesterday, and in our meeting, there were folks from all over the US, Canada, Nigeria, Kenya, Serbia, all folks that are bringing GPS to their unique communities. And we know that social support is the cornerstone of treatment of so many issues. Having a consistent system is really essential. When every program is just sort of winging it can create burnout for the group facilitators. It can hurt the program. There can be lack of consistency. And really the clients and the people who are attending maybe aren't getting the quality of care that they really deserve. And so we love to just share that we really believe in the GPS model as the cornerstone of your support group work. We're trusting that many of you who are here today will have already taken the GPS training. But just a note, if you haven't, I want to say before you jump in to launching your group, highly encourage you to attend, if you haven't already, our GPS facilitator training and certification. This is how we get things started in that consistent way that's really going to support our folks. And so a little bit more about GPS if you don't know these things. GPS is trauma-informed and community-based group mental health care. It can promote resiliency, self-efficacy, empowerment. It increases social support and diminishes isolation. It provides a structure that's easy to use and adaptable. And it's been implemented by professionals and peer leaders, like I said, nationally and internationally. And this is a model that's going to give you everything you need to create a brave space for your participants and for you to feel confident as a facilitator. A little bit more about GPS. These are some of the evidence-based modalities that are wrapped into our model. And you do not have to be a therapist. You do not have to have a clinical license or letters after your name. This really is peer support, but we like to show you what we put into our model that helps us really provide the support that we know is rooted in evidence, in a trauma-informed approach, and in a social justice framework. So let's dive into what we are doing today. So here are today's topics. Who is your group for? We're going to talk about that. The logistics, where and when, tools and supplies, how we get the word out, how we find funding for our groups, talking about facilitation team, talking about keeping people safe, a little bit of what happens if, and tools and support and self-care for you as a facilitator and a group leader. And oh my, we are going to try our best to get through that in about an hour. Here's a great quote by Maya Angelou. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. And we know that people deserve spaces to talk about those untold stories. So let's talk about who our group is for. This is something that can be really important for us to get clear on who we're hoping will attend our group. So here are some examples of who GPS groups can be for: people in recovery, Black moms, parents of neurodivergent kiddos. We just had folks come through our training that are going to be offering this group. LGBTQIA plus parents, the Jewish community. GPS is partnered with the Jewish community in Boston to start offering some really amazing support there. GPS for college students, and really your unique community. And if you want to, you're welcome to put in the chat. It's nice to sort of know who's in the space if you want to share who you are running groups for or would like to run groups for. And you can see some of the folks who are here live taking a look at this information. So just remembering, the more we understand who our group is for, the more successful we're going to be, the more that we are going to create something that's really going to meet the needs of our unique population. So let's talk a little bit about group logistics. The where, when, how long, is there a cost, all of these questions. So let's just start with where. So the first thing I like to recommend is that we choose a neutral location. So we want to think about how to remove barriers that might keep people from attending our groups. So for instance, I mentioned that I have previously done some groups for people who've experienced birth trauma. And I would say that a neutral location for those people might not be the hospital where the trauma happened, right? We might think about using churches, but we might think about who our population is and whether they are the population that's accessing those churches, and whether those churches and faith traditions are supportive and welcoming to that population. So thinking about offering a group for LGBTQIA plus folks, knowing that there can be religious trauma in this community in ways that they have not been met well. And so we might think, where can we find a neutral location for the folks that we're working with? Thinking about things like, we probably wouldn't want to have a recovery group right next to a bar, just these little things, considering the location and considering if it creates barriers for people to come. Is it on a good transportation line for public transportation, if that's possible? Does it have good parking? Those kinds of things can be really good things to be considering. Thinking about what day and time works best for the population you're inviting. So considering what their schedules might look like, their work schedules. If you're running a group for, let's say, working parents, probably not going to work to do it at 10 a.m., right? If you're running a group for school-aged parents, 3 o'clock might be the pickup time for a lot of those parents. So we're going to think about what we know about our community. We might think about when early release is, or if we're working with a population who has, that's a lot of faith-based folks, do they have days that are sacred in their traditions? Do they have days where they're typically attending church or synagogue? And so we're going to think about that. We're going to consider frequency. How often do you want to be facilitating, and how often will work for your folks? Sometimes we see groups that meet about once a month. That's nice for a facilitator if we don't have a lot of time to invest, but it can be challenging because if someone misses 1 month, it's a long time before they're able to attend again. So if we have, say, a group for perinatal moms and somebody's really in crisis and misses a group, they're going to have up to 6 or 7 weeks possibly before they can get to another group. We might think about 2 times a month, bi-weekly. I really recommend that we anchor those to things like second and fourth Wednesdays or first and third Tuesdays rather than every other, because that can get a little confusing. And then weekly is also an option, and lots of our groups run every week. One of the big things to think of is schedules and sustainability. So if you are going to be facilitating and you think, I want to run a group for working parents and it's going to be every Saturday morning, do you want to give up every Saturday morning for yourself and your family as a facilitator? Or would every other Saturday be a better option for you? We're going to think a little bit about, like I said, sustainability, what our own personal schedules are, what's the availability of the location we might have chosen. And then just to note, sometimes people want to crowdsource or poll their people. And I would suggest, consider that it might work better for you as a facilitator to take all these things into consideration and just pick a time. My personal experience with crowdsourcing is that if you ask 20 people when they can attend a group, they will give you 20 different days and times. So choosing when your facilitators can do it, what's available in terms of location might be really helpful. And then we want to choose that date and time and keep it consistent. Making too many changes, making frequent changes can make it frustrating for participants to find us or to access our group. Talking a little bit about drop-in groups versus closed groups. So a drop-in would mean that folks can attend. Maybe the group is every Wednesday and you can just show up at that location or online. A closed group would maybe have a 6-week cycle or a 10-week cycle. People would register and it would start at one time and all the same people would attend for that full cycle. The pros and cons of those, in a drop-in group, we don't know how many people will attend, but then again, they can come whenever it works for them. It can be different attendees from week to week, which can be fun and interesting, brings a lot of diversity. Other people may feel more comfortable in a closed group where they know it's going to be the same 10 people showing up over and over. When we do a closed group as a facilitator, we'll know how many people will attend. There's a bit of some guaranteed attendance to a certain extent, because typically if people are going to register for 6 weeks, they're going to show up for most of those 6 weeks. And then the same attendees week after week. So you can build on topics if you want to do that. You can ensure your group members that they're going to be building connections with the same people. And so this is just a consideration when we're thinking about drop-in groups versus closed. Talking about the duration of a group session, 90 minutes is a real sweet spot for these group sessions, for GPS groups. 45 to 60 minutes can work, and I've heard of people running a group during a lunch hour, but it will be very tight and it will require some fairly rigid facilitation and timekeeping. And we're really going to want to watch that time. It's going to be a little challenging to run a group in that squeezy of a time. 2 hours starts to become a lot unless you have some activities or curriculum or guest speakers wrapped into that group. And you can be sure to give a break if you're online and you're going more than an hour and a half. It's nice to have a break in between, but just really considering all of these factors will help you decide what seems like a good duration for your group. Considering the cost for attendance, will there be a cost? Is cost going to be a barrier for your population? Can you get sponsorships, or are you embedded in an organization that will help provide funding? Will your facilitators be paid, or will they be volunteering their time? How will you collect that money and where will it go? I've heard of everything from drop-in groups that ask for a $10 or $20 donation and usually have wording that says no one turned away regardless of ability to pay. There are organizations, hospitals, Department of Health, these kinds of things that embed groups in their programs. And so they may provide the funding through that organization or partnership. But thinking about that, really, I think the biggest question is cost going to be a barrier for your population? And is cost needed for sustainability, right? As facilitators, we're already going to be doing the time, the emotional and mental labor, the holding space. Do we also need to get paid in order for this to be a sustainable role for us? Or are we willing to volunteer? And those things are all things that we consider. A little bit about the pros and cons of online groups and in-person groups. So first, I want to be really clear. I am a lover of online groups. I have been running online groups since about 4 years pre-COVID. So I was running online groups for a long time before the lockdown hit and everybody, there was this, mass exodus to online. And I heard a lot of people being really negative about online groups or feeling like it's the less than option. And as soon as we can get back to in-person. And what I have found is that there are benefits and drawbacks to both. Neither is better or worse. They're just pros and cons. So a few thoughts of those things. Online can be really accessible without transportation. We can bring folks together from a wide variety of locations. If we're working in a very rural area with no public transportation, that might be something to consider. It can sometimes be more accessible to do an online group for disabled folks or for folks who struggle with social anxiety. It can be a little easier sometimes for new parents. They don't have to pack up a baby or find childcare. So those are some of the things that really are beneficial about an online group. There's no cost to pay. for a facility. We'll get a little bit more into, we might have to pay for a platform like this, like Zoom, but there's no cost to pay for a facility. Facilitators don't have travel time. We don't have to set up. My original groups were in person, and I had to lug a big bin full of stuff back and forth to my group every week. And online, I don't have to do that. But also, people are really craving in person now, and we're seeing this, and we know that being in person with each other, being in the same room, breathing the same air, having a chance to hug when that feels good to us, all of that can be really positive too. And that's a really beneficial part of in-person groups. We can have snacks, we can have water, we can offer childcare if that feels important. We want to make sure it's accessible for transportation and parking. We might be able to offer activities that require supplies that people might not have available in their home. We may need to have items, though, to set up the room. If those aren't provided by the place that we're meeting, chairs, table. For a parents group, we might want to have baby toys. In an in-person room, we're able to offer tangible resources. So I know sometimes in the new parents groups, they might have diaper donations or things like this that new parents can access. And some people will just really prefer an in-person gathering, and that's okay. We really want to be mindful of and talk about COVID precautions and just generally keeping people well when we're meeting in in-person groups. And that will be group to group. You'll know your population best. And, I'll encourage you to think about how that will feel to your folks. And to, if you want to make it really clear, masks are welcome, but not required. Things like that can really help people to feel a little safer as we're all being a little more precautious as we've moved through this time of COVID. And one last thought about online versus in person. I don't love hybrid groups. I've been asked about this a lot. Hybrid meaning there's some people in person and some people online. I think it works fine for city council meetings. I'm a urban dahlia farmer. I go to a dahlia meeting once a month and they do a hybrid meeting. It works well for informational meetings, meetings where one person is talking and, the room can kind of watch a monitor. But for a group where we're sharing from the heart, a group where we're inviting people to be vulnerable and authentic, it's a lot more challenging to open up to a room full of people and also have someone watching you on screen. It's a lot more challenging to make sure that everyone can hear all the shares. And so for this particular purpose, I have not been a fan of hybrid groups. If any of you try it sometime and you find ways to make it successful, I would love to hear about that. So moving on to our suggested tools and supplies. There are in-person ideas and online ideas. I can see somehow the slide isn't pulling up our in-person things, but that's okay, we'll go through them. So in person, we're gonna wanna have things like chairs or comfortable seating. We're gonna wanna have a table for resources, for snacks, for water. We might need a clipboard and a pen to have a sign-in. Printed resources, tissues, hand sanitizer, name tags, miscellaneous supplies that are specific to our group, like baby toys. A recovery group might have recovery coins. We might be doing some art or creative things. We might have art supplies, fidget toys. Those are the kinds of things that we might want for an in-person group. For an online group, we're going to need Zoom or another online gathering platform. We're going to want to have a virtual sign-in form of some kind. Those can be made through Google Forms. JotForm has a free platform, but some kind of an online sign-in. We may want to have a virtual resource list for an online group so that we can refer people to a tangible resource list that's listed somewhere online. And then paper and pen for us as facilitators. When I'm facilitating an online space, I'm frequently jotting down little notes for myself and just keeping track of what's happening. I am gonna pause and take a drink of my water. We like self-care around here. So please also take care of yourselves as you're listening. So let's talk a little bit about getting the word out. How do we get people to our groups? How do we do the marketing, the promotion, the things that are going to let people know this group is available and here's how you attend. So first, I want to talk a little bit about community partners. So thinking about who works with your potential attendees, obstetricians and midwives, WIC, Women, Infant, Children program, maybe treatment and recovery centers, doctors or other healthcare providers, Department of Health, local businesses. So if I was running a new parent group, I might think about the trampoline park or the local preschool, right? Food banks, Head Start, daycare, a gym or a YMCA. Frequently, there are businesses that have things that you can put flyers in the back of a bathroom stall, which is a great place. You got a captive audience, somebody who's sitting right there looking at your thing for at least a couple of minutes. So lots of creative ways that we can think about how to promote through community partners. And we're going to maybe brainstorm a list of who are the people that are working with my attendees, my potential attendees, and how can I connect with them. We're going to think about printed materials. So things like postcards, business cards, flyers, posters. I loved having little cards to give out whenever that had the information about our group. That was just an easy thing to pass along to people. Another really great idea for print material is thinking about creating a resource list that's appropriate for your potential clients, your potential attendees, and then having that resource list available to your community partners, right? So it would have your group front and center, but then other things that might be relevant resources for your population. And you update it regularly and get it to those community partners. And usually they are very happy to have a robust and up-to-date resource list. And it's a great way to give value to them, to help to encourage them to give that out and to help promote more than just your group, but resources for their clients as well. We're going to think about emails. So I highly encourage you to collect emails from your attendees. There are lots of platforms. Constant Contact is one. You can look up email programs. Lots of platforms that you can automate your reminders. So when I run groups, I have an automated message that goes out the day before group. That's a reminder, just a reminder, we have group tomorrow. And then I have another automated message that goes out 1 hour before group. Just a reminder, group starts in an hour. And those I set up ahead of time, and it's sort of a crock pot of marketing. It's fix it and forget it. You can schedule all those emails, and then you just add the emails as you collect them. And it's a great way to stay in touch with people. If you are sending out a newsletter on behalf of your own business or your own work, or emails that go out through your organization, of course, getting a blurb in those newsletters. If your community partners have a newsletter, you might think about writing something, again, value added. So if I were running a group for new parents, I might write a short thing, 5 easy ways for new parents to get some self-care in. And then I'd offer that to my community partners with information about my group as something they could include in their newsletter. So thinking about things like this, how can I not just ask somebody to promote me, but how can I bring value to them as well? And that's really going to create community partners that are willing to invest because there's some reciprocity to the relationship. Thinking about bulletin boards and where we can actually put physical flyers and things. I said, back of bathroom stalls, bulletin boards like in coffee shops, grocery stores. There are digital bulletin boards around that we can find lots of places to post and promote. I used to go around, I had a spreadsheet of all of the bulletin boards in my area, and I would keep track of that. Once a month, I'd drive around and put up a new flyer and just continually refresh that information. So keeping track of those. And really, it's consistency. One flyer, one time is not as likely to get you a lot of attendance, but somebody seeing that flyer every time they go to that grocery store or that coffee shop is really going to get people thinking about attending your group. Thinking about networking. So networking like professional events, there are often things like perinatal task forces, Department of Health, mental health task force. My partner and I just attended a Washington Council of Fatherhood community roundtable event. And I got to network with a lot of other people who are doing work with dads. We might think about business networking groups. One locally, it's nationwide, but I'm familiar with it locally, is BNI, Business Networking International. So often those groups allow you to come as a guest and present some information. We can think about higher learning, college and trade schools, public health clinics, anywhere that we could go that might be hosting events that are open to the public, where we can network and connect with peers and other professionals and people who are looking for resources like what we have. And what I hear over and over again from so many people in the helping and healing professions is we need these resources. And what I know is the resources are out there. And so it's really a matter of connecting. And I would say getting the word out, the marketing and promotion, is probably one of the biggest jobs you'll have as a facilitator, is to really continually have a schedule for yourself and continually ask. Sometimes I tell our new facilitators, if you are not sick of listening to yourself talk about your group, you're probably not talking about it enough. So talk about it until you are tired of talking about it, and then talk about it a little bit more. Thinking about social media and how we might use that. We've got Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I really encourage you, don't worry about being on every platform. Pick the one that you're already on, that you use a lot, that you engage with your people a lot, and just start there. If you don't want to do TikTok dance videos and point at words, don't do it. You don't have to do those things. If you're somebody who writes really beautifully and you want to write some things about your experiences, Facebook is going to be a great place because we can add a lot of text and content there. If you're somebody who takes beautiful pictures, or there's great imagery inherent in in the population you're working with, you might want to be on Instagram. But I do think that social media is sort of the new town center in a lot of ways, and frequently that is where we're going to find folks. You don't have to be on social media, but I do think finding one platform that works for you and promoting there is a really good idea. You can also run targeted ads. Those are really helpful. I facilitate a local death cafe here in Everett, Washington, and our host location is a funeral home. They run targeted ads for us on Facebook. And every single time we do our death cafe session, multiple people said that they are there because they saw the Facebook ad. So it can be a really great way. If you are local, you can really run a targeted ad. You can look for only showing it to parents in your area who have kids this age, and you can really niche down on who's seeing that, so that you're not paying for something to go out to tons of people who aren't necessarily your potential attendees. Thinking about community events, these are things like expos, job fairs. I mentioned mental health roundtable, neighborhood and city meetings. Our city of Everett has neighborhood meetings that our city is broken up into 8 or 10 neighborhoods, and they run monthly meetings, and they welcome guests to come in and share a little about what's happening in the community. City meetings, farmers markets. Often farmers markets have a free booth or a very much reduced price booth for nonprofits. Information nights at schools or facilities. Thinking about things like, is there a local preschool and you're working with new parents? And often people who are in the age range of 0 to 4 are likely to have another baby at some point, or they know people who are going to have a baby. And so if they have a back to school night, you might reach out to them. And again, thinking about reciprocity, what can I offer? Not just, can I show up and use your platform that you've done hard work on to do my stuff, but what could I offer? Can I bring in some great resources? Can I offer to provide snacks for the kiddos? Can I bring some coloring pages and invite kids to come? Years ago, I did a local farm, basically a farmer's market, and I ran a bubble machine at my booth. And it's just a little machine that runs on a battery, and it just blows a steady stream of bubbles. And every parent with a kid 5 years old and under was at my booth chatting with me. Every single one, because all those kids wanted to come and check out the bubbles. And honestly, a lot of the adults did too. So things like that, just thinking about how am I going to attract the attention of these people that are my target folks. The last couple of things on here, materials for attendees. So you might have things that your group members can take. Maybe a magnet with the information and the schedule for your group that they can put on their refrigerator. We had some really great little cards years ago when I was running my postpartum groups. They were from moo.com, and they were little cards that had quotes about parenthood on one side, sometimes inspirational, sometimes funny. My favorite one said, "The joys of parenting are never fully realized until the children are in bed." And that's when you realize the joy, right? And then the back had information about our group for new moms. One of my favorites also just said, "You are doing a great job." And so we gave those to group members. And when they were out and about in the places where they're meeting other moms and they're seeing somebody really just taking care of a crying baby and a tantruming toddler, and they would go up and say, "You're doing such a good job," and hand the card. And it's a sweet moment for them to connect, but also has our group info on. I also heard from a group member that she used to go to the library and stick our cards in every birth and baby and parenting book and tuck them into all of the cards at the library. So things like this we can be thinking about. And then lastly on this list, fun stuff. It's really easy to make a QR code. That's not challenging. You can do, there's a million places online to do it for free. So you can add that to flyers and print materials. I mentioned the inspo cards, something like offering a drawing for a prize, right? Share this post and this thing happens, or, you know, everybody who comes to group is going to be entered to win whatever. Check details about how that works in case you have a state, if you're in a state or a place where you can't offer lotteries or that kind of thing. But generally, I think it's, if you're not selling them, you're probably good. All right, so that's all. We spent a lot of time there because that's a big job. But let's talk a little bit about funding our group. How do we find funding? So back to community partners, we can think about donated space for a meeting. Frequently, we can check with a partner who also is doing work with the similar population. We might know of a business who's open during the day and closed at night that has a conference room, and we could ask if we could use that space. We could find a partner who might have a Zoom account that we can use. Free Zoom only allows you to have a meeting of up to 40 minutes before it cuts you off. So you're going to need to have a paid Zoom account if you're using that platform, but you might be able to find somebody who can let you use their Zoom platform. We can think about financial donations and things to consider there. Do we need to be a nonprofit? We want to have transparency of where those donations are going. We can think about a fiscal sponsor. If we are not a 501c3 or a nonprofit, there are organizations that will offer fiscal sponsorship, which means they will act as an umbrella and take donations on behalf of your group or your organization, and then pass that through so that you can get reimbursed for marketing or space, that kind of thing. We can also think about donations in kind. So we had snacks at our groups, and one of the places we got snacks from, our group started at 6 p.m. and the cafe next door closed at 5:30, and we would go in and they would just give us all of their donuts and pastries and stuff, and it was a great partnership with them. They were happy to do it. We can ask around for other donations in kind, name tags, those different kinds of things. Maybe we crowdsource that. This is how I started my first group. I crowdsourced and said, who has some baby toys and a clipboard and some name tags and a ream of paper? And I just asked my friends to donate these items to help me get those first groups for new moms off the ground. We might choose to charge our attendees. And again, we talked about that a little bit. I want to encourage you to think about if that's going to create a barrier or not, what's affordable, how you will collect that money, etc. We're going to consider whether we have all volunteers as facilitators, or if they're paid. Are we providing childcare, and do we need to pay the childcare providers? All of these things are going to go into what we're thinking about when we're thinking about funding. And then also we can do fundraisers. My original groups were called Hope Circle, and we had a once a year event that was always the weekend after Mother's Day. And we had different providers come in. We had massage therapists, henna artists. They would donate their time and they would pamper the moms who came. The tickets were inexpensive. We asked community members to scholarship tickets. So if they weren't a new mom or a recent mom, they could purchase a ticket on behalf of one. So we always scholarshiped tons of moms in. If you wanted to be there, we got you there. The food was donated, and it was always a really great fundraiser for us, as well as a way to really give the moms in our community something fun and nourishing for them. Community art events, a make and take kind of a thing. These are all things that you could think about in terms of fundraisers and finding funds for our groups. So I have a quick quote for you. Let me say this. The slide is a quick quote, but I'm going to read you more of it because I really love this whole quote. I love this idea. We can sometimes just get overwhelmed with how much there is to fix, how much suffering, how much trauma is happening in our world. And this is such a beautiful reminder. Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. And here's more of this quote. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small, determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale. So I just want to remind us, we do not have to take on the whole job. We get to be part of a community of people who is doing small acts that continually add to, add more. And we reach out and work on that little corner of our world that is important to us. And that's what we do. And as we each do that, we build goodness into this world, and we change the world together. So talking about our facilitation team, who should lead your unique group? Here are a bunch of photos of some different kinds of people who might be leading a group. We really want to encourage you to know that the spoiler alert is probably you. Who should lead the group in your unique community? You. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. The next slide here has this great picture of a saying that I love from Judy Chamberlain: nothing about us without us. So this is meaning when we at GPS are thinking about who might facilitate these groups, we encourage them to be facilitated by someone from within the community, someone with lived experience, someone who gets it. GPS is committed to training our leaders and to training leaders who people already trust, to offering GPS groups in locations that are already experienced as trustworthy by the people being served. And I just mentioned recently to some friends that there's an organization that was looking at how to support Black fathers in, I think it was Chicago, I'm not positive, but recently. And what they did was they started asking, where are Black fathers hanging out? And the answer that came overwhelmingly was barbershops. It was a gathering place for the men. They would sit and wait for their, to touch up their fade, to have their haircut. And so they trained the barbers, who were older Black men who had already been dads. They trained them in peer support, and they really saw an improvement in outcomes. And so really thinking about, where are these places where people already trust the people there? Who are the facilitators that are already embedded in the community? And this really allows for appropriate cultural co-creation of this model that can meet the needs and the definition of safety that is of, for, and by each unique community. Not our job to decide what this community can feel safe in or what is for them, but it's really the community that can speak to us. And so when we are from that community, when we have lived experience, we are going to have such a better way of moving through really knowing and understanding our community. That being said, sometimes it's just necessary. We might not have that lived experience. Frequently, we have a lot of folks that come through our trainings that are doing work in recovery. And frequently, some of them are recovery counselors, social workers, and they do not have lived experience with substance abuse, but they have had a lot of work with that population. They're embedded in that population. Maybe they have personal stories of a sibling or a parent, and they have some lived experience around that. And we work with a co-facilitation model. So awesome, best practice is really to have at least one facilitator in your co-facilitation team that has lived experience or is from the community that you're working with. So talking about keeping people safe. This is one of the things that we are frequently asked lots of questions about, and we really want to just name that it's part of being trauma informed, that we're thinking about how do we keep people safe when we're asking them to show up and we're asking them to be vulnerable. What are the measures that we take? I want to say up front, this is not legal advice, so you will want to explore with your sponsoring organization, your certifying body, an attorney, those kinds of things, whatever you might need to do to make sure that you are satisfied with how you move into this topic. But I'll go over some of the things that we really encourage or recommend. So first is a disclaimer or a release. So part of your participant intake, part of that sign-in form could say something like, this group is peer support. It does not offer therapeutic or medical advice. We don't diagnose or treat. And if what you're experiencing exceeds the scope of peer support, we will make referrals, right? And it's just at the top of every sign-in sheet or part of the digital sign-in sheet that people move through so that they know what they're signing up for. It clearly states that it's peer support. We definitely want to have a crisis protocol. So we want to have a plan for what we are going to do if we have to deal with someone in crisis. If we have a sponsoring organization, maybe we're embedded in a recovery org or in a hospital, they may already have a crisis protocol that we can lean on. So we want to ask there first. And if we don't, then we're going to want to write that. What happens if this, if this happens, if someone says this, then these are the steps that we take. We want to really understand for ourselves things like, do we understand the difference between thoughts and plans of action? Because people deserve a place to talk about hard things. But they deserve a place to talk about those things without everyone getting reactive around them. And there is a difference between passive suicidality and thoughts like, sometimes I think maybe I don't want to wake up in the morning, and actually having a plan of action. And so for part of our training, part of how we move as a facilitator, we're going to want to know the difference between those things. People really deserve to be able to open up about those, about scary thoughts and about hard things. And so then we also want to know, what are the crisis resources in our community? We want to ask and know, are they safe for Black and Brown people and families? Are they safe for LGBTQ plus people and families? And not all resources, not all crisis resources, crisis lines, emergency room, 911 call, CPS referrals, they are not safe or not equally safe for all families and all people. And so we really want to know what's appropriate in our community. If we're working in a community that has a high Indigenous population, maybe we're going to reach out to the tribal center and find out what the resources are that that local tribe provides. If we're working with LGBTQ population, we might see if there's a P flag or a local queer center, and we can reach out to them and make sure that we have vetted those resources. And then we're going to want to know the numbers for the crisis line for these things, so that if we meet a crisis, we're not scrambling to figure out what to do in the moment, and that we have a plan that we can move through. We also want to have robust resource lists. So we are going to want to create a resource list. It might be something that we offer to participants in a print form or virtual, but we're going to make sure that it includes things like mental health providers that are relevant to our population. And then other services and support, like support for intimate partner violence, support for people experiencing homelessness or food insecurity. If we're running groups for recovery and sobriety, we're going to maybe want to have some other groups or other supports that are available in our community. But really vetting those resources and making sure that they are culturally appropriate for the people we're working with, I think is so important. Just going on to like therapy today or whatever the website is not good enough because providers can list themselves and just mark check boxes. And so really reaching out and saying, do you have training and experience in working with perinatal mood and anxiety disorders? Who are the Black therapists and mental health providers in my community? Who are the folks who are working with my tribal members in my community, so that we're offering resources and referrals to places that are culturally appropriate? Thinking about mandated reporting, always an important thing to talk about. So first, we need to know whether we are required by our licensing and certifying body to be a mandated reporter and what that means. We want to be familiar with what is reportable. So back to this thoughts versus plan of action. Or, we might be running parenting groups. Bad parenting we don't agree with, it doesn't necessarily mean that's reportable. And we really want to think about not just our own reaction in those situations, but what is the outcome for this family? What does this cause additional trauma? Is this community disproportionately impacted by their children being removed? Or do they have generational trauma around these things? And then that's going to inform how we choose to make these referrals or when we need to make these calls. Part of a crisis plan is knowing how you will access this if necessary. So for instance, if you did feel like you were meeting a situation and mandated reporting was required, will the participant be with you while you make that phone call? How will you talk to them about that? All of this can be part of your crisis plan. Do you need to talk to a supervisor? And you can make phone calls to these various organizations and get material that will help you make those choices. You can call and say, a hypothetical situation, does this rise to the level of needing to be reported? And you can get some direction that way. And if you have an organization or if you have a supervisor or somebody who you can ask, that's definitely should be a part of your crisis plan as well. And then last on this is we get to keep ourselves safe too. I would like to suggest that if we are saying we are running a trauma-informed support group and we as the facilitator are being traumatized by what we're doing in that support group, I wonder if that is a trauma-informed support group. So we also need to have resources for ourselves and support for ourselves. So maybe it's just brainstorming, who can I call to talk about in an anonymous way something that came up in my group? What learning do I need to do around some of these things? Reminding ourselves that we can listen to hard things, but we also deserve to have support for ourselves in order to do that safely. We might want to have friends that we can talk to, peers, other support folks, and just generally making sure that we have resources to support us as we're moving through hard topics or hard situations. All right, here is our what happens if. I feel like these are an assortment of things that people are always asking about or a little worried about. So what happens if no one comes? Well, I want to talk a little about early sessions in a group. It's very typical. Your first few groups, you're getting the word out. Very typical to have no one show up. Very typical to have 0 at the first session, 0 at the second session, then 1 attendee, then 2, then 0. than one, right? And it takes a little while to build some momentum. And that's why that consistency is really important. And this is where a co-facilitator can really come in handy because that person will be there. I just had the experience where one of our facilitators with GPS got ready. He was ready to run his support group. He got logged on. There's a little frantic scrambling for some logistics around the technology, and he prepared and he got his questions ready, and then no one showed up. And I talked to him afterwards and he was like, I'm bummed. Like that was a lot of work and a lot of effort. And then wah, wah. So knowing, again, resources for us, who can I call and just say, like, this is kind of a bummer. So those are some great things to think about, is just what if no one shows up? What if I don't have a co-facilitator? That's okay. My first suggestion would be find one. GPS might be able to help you connect with somebody through one of our trainings. You're going to look in your community. You can start a group solo, but it is a lot harder. You could start your group and then identify someone from within the group that you could invite to be a co-facilitator. But just generally, my answer to this, what if I don't have a co-facilitator? My answer is find one and, put the word out and tap your community and see who you can partner with. What if I haven't taken the GPS training? This is another short answer. Take it. Definitely you will want a model or a framework of some kind. And I wouldn't be working with GPS for the last 12 plus years if I didn't think that GPS is one of the best facilitation models out there. So I definitely encourage you to take the GPS training, facilitator training, if you haven't already. What happens if someone brings up difficult topics? We talked about this, and it's frequent in our group sessions, even when the question isn't specific to these things, that someone brings up childhood abuse history, or someone brings up passive suicidal kinds of thoughts or intrusive thoughts in new parenting groups. And those topics are hard. They're hard to listen to. They're hard for us to sit with. And I always remind us, if this person is living with this thing day in, day out, we can listen to them for 3 minutes, right? So if they are suffering with those dark thoughts, if they are suffering with deep grief, and they're getting up every morning and getting through their day with that, we can sit with them and listen for a few minutes. And I really believe that's part of what the GPS model does, is gives us a framework for listening to hard things. And so it's okay. It's actually what our groups are for. We want people to be able to have a space where they can say the things that they might not be able to say anywhere else. What happens if I don't know what to talk about in a group? And this comes up a lot too. You'll develop topics, you'll develop check-in questions. Part of our GPS training is teaching you how to develop realities of your community, the barriers, the challenges, those kinds of things. And you're going to lean into your own lived experience. You might think about, what are people talking about on social media? What comes up with your friends over and over and over again? What are you seeing in movies and TV shows? For me, frequently with new parents, there are so many memes about parenting, and I'll just see the same theme showing up in funny things that people are posting. And I'll think, oh, this is a good topic to bring into group for us to talk about. What happens if I make a mistake? So I want to say this. I believe that this is not an if, but a when. What happens when we make a mistake? If we are doing this work, if we are in it with our whole hearts, we are also beautifully imperfect humans. And it is very likely that we will stumble, we will trip, we will make a mistake. One of the things we can do ahead of time is think about our own conflict styles: fight, flight, freeze, how our family of origin dealt with mistakes, apologies, repair. Just knowing a little bit about ourselves is really helpful. And then know ahead of time how to make an apology without being defensive, without needing to explain, how to move through repair. Make a plan before the mess happens so that you'll be able to move through it confidently. And then just remember that none of us is perfect. And you'll go back to that support for you. Who can you call to process the mistake that you made? And somebody that can tell you, you're a good human. Yes, you messed up, but you're a good human. And that can be really helpful as we move through mistakes. And then lastly, what happens if I'm not sure that I'm the right person to do this? And I want to say this comes up in our groups all the time, in our trainings, in our groups. Imposter syndrome, feeling awkward, wondering, am I really equipped to do this? Thinking, I don't have letters after my name. How am I going to hold space for these big things? And I just want to remind us that we don't have to be perfect to be perfectly good facilitators. And I wholeheartedly believe that if you have a passion to bring this work to your community, that you are exactly the right facilitator for your community. All right. We are getting close to wrapping up. A few more things to talk about. So tools, support, and self-care. We talked about this first one a little bit. Who will you call when you need support? Compassion fatigue, burnout, trauma. For us, just having it can get tiring. It can be a lot. And we shouldn't have to be completely tapped out to be in this type of role. And modeling our own self-care, modeling for our group members, we take care of ourselves. We aren't asking you to sacrifice yourselves and everything that you have to do work or to caretake or these kinds of things. Really modeling our own self-care and support shows our group members that we're taking care, that we are holding ourselves in that. And it can model that and allow for people to say, wow, she really does a good job taking care of herself. He really takes breaks or does things that he needs to do. And it can really be a positive thing for folks to see. You might want to make a list of who you can call when you need support for a difficult topic. Maybe you need advice. Maybe you want to have a friend that has done a lot of work in anti-racism and social justice, and that's the person you're going to call when you think you might have made a statement that wasn't so positive for a certain person or group. And you're going to want to know, are there topics for you that are going to be particularly tender or difficult? And, just knowing that ahead of time will allow you to regulate your own experience. We are going to learn to notice our own experience. That's on here as well. Things like what happens in my body when I am very activated, right? If I have experienced a loss and somebody else is talking about a very similar loss, can I notice first that I'm getting a little bit agitated or a little bit activated or a little emotional around that? It doesn't mean we have to be, bricks of non-human emotion and robots. We can experience emotion, we can feel tender in group, but we also need to be taking care of ourselves. So we might need to ask, do I need to do more learning in order to best serve the people who will be attending my group? Self-awareness, somatic work, these kinds of things can be really helpful in supporting ourselves. A GPS curriculum is a tool. We currently have the postpartum, the recovery curriculum, and one in Spanish as well. And that's a tool for you that gives you everything you need to run sessions, the topics, the things you'll say, and can be a really great resource. I highly encourage using scripts and practicing. And so by scripts, I mean type out for yourself or write out for yourself exactly how you're going to say it and refer to that. Have those things with you. Say it out loud while you're driving in the car or while you're taking a shower or whatever, wherever you can sort of hear your own voice, say the things out loud. Practice. It's really going to do you a huge service when you get in front of other folks and you're running your group and it's a little more high stakes to have already heard these things, to already know how it's going to sound as you say those things. Cheat sheets. I always had a cheat sheet and still use a cheat sheet frequently for groups. So whatever your outline is, whatever you use for yourself, other cheat sheets that I've had through the years are like a list of all kinds of emotions, like 70 different emotions that we can experience. And that would frequently help me if I was trying to sort of name some things or offer reflection, which is part of our GPS model, to someone that I could easily glance at my list and have some ideas available to me. Taking breaks is a really important tool and a really important self-care. So build this in. Know that it's okay to push pause on your group and go on vacation. Know that it's okay to say we're not meeting in December and the first part of January because it's just not sustainable for me and everybody else will be pretty busy too. So plan those breaks into your time and hopefully choose not to feel guilty about that. It's really okay, and it's going to bring you back to the work refreshed and ready and recharged and in having more capacity to hold that space. Practicing mindfulness. You know, we build mindfulness into our GPS model, but us practicing it as a facilitator can help us learn how to regulate our emotions. It's good for us in a whole bunch of ways. It can be helpful in learning to notice our own experience or our activation, in regrounding and recentering ourselves when we need to, and can just be a really good tool for us in small doses. There's lots of free resources for mindfulness, and finding something that works for you. I always say in my groups, there's no wrong way to do mindfulness. There are lots of ways out there to do it. And so finding something that will help you, I think, can be a really great tool. Your co-facilitator is a partner in this work. That is absolutely a tool for support and self-care. Highly recommend that. Having some pre-group planning time. So showing up with your co-facilitator 10 or 15 minutes early, having a quick check-in with that person so that you're arriving and you're, I'm just fought with my partner and I'm, you know, you're not getting to group 2 minutes before it starts and having all that energy, but you've arrived a little early. You can check in with your co-facilitator and maybe discharge a little of that and be a little more centered when group starts. And then having a plan. You're just going to feel more confident if you have a plan and you know what's going to happen. A post-group debrief is always really helpful too. What went well? What could we do differently next time? What are a bunch of themes that might have come up that would be helpful as topics for another group session? So staying just 10 or 15 minutes after, again, with your co-facilitator, or if you're facilitating by yourself, most of the groups that I run now, I do solo, and I have a debrief worksheet that I do for myself, and I have a whole notebook full of them, and it's really an ongoing resource for me. A last couple of things on here, ongoing learning. So do you need to do some more learning around things like, let's say you're doing work in your community and you're noticing there are lots of folks coming who identify as LGBTQIA, and you might need to do a little more learning so that you have appropriate and supportive words, you know how to interact in a way that feels respectful. There are also things around GPS will be starting in this year, some skills clinics that will be available to you, and those will be a place where you'll be able to come and ask questions. You might be thinking about doing work in communities and more in the realm of solidarity or anti-racism. You might want to do some more learning around that, but ongoing learning around any of these things. We're doing a lot of talking about some advanced trainings for facilitators here at GPS, and I am really excited about that as well. And then lastly on this list, your own personal healing and growth support. The wounded healer trope is a trope because it's a thing. So many of us are in this work because we are trying to create what we wanted or what we needed and wasn't there for us. And so knowing where is my stuff that I need to work on and where is the group stuff, understanding those boundaries can be so helpful. So therapy, if that works for us, our own support group can be helpful. Mindfulness or somatic learning, creativity, the groups that we offer here at GPS, and really just remembering while you are holding space for others, who is holding you? And I really do think that's something that we should all be considering as facilitators. We have moved through all of the topics. These are a few things that we're going to just share with you to let you know what else is available for your support and what's coming up at GPS. And so I'm going to let Nelly is going to share a little bit about these resources with you.
Thank you, Crystal. Well, we have some free and online support groups here at GPS. We have a group for Black leaders on Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We have the GPS for people in recovery on Wednesdays at 5. GPS for Everyone, which is an open group. The name of that group is Stronger Together, and you get to see and hang out with Crystal for an hour and a half on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have a group on Thursdays completely in Spanish, in Espanol, and that is for Latina mothers. That group meets on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And all the links are in the chat. And of course, you can go to our website and we have them listed on the calendar as well. Yeah. We also have trainings that happen year round. Our next training will be the GPS group support facilitator training in Spanish, and that is for the Latino community. So if you are bilingual or if you are supporting the Latino community, this training is for you. The training has been rescheduled to March 26th of 2024. It is exactly the same training that we facilitate in English, but this is in Spanish, and you get to hang out with me there and with all the GPS and Espanol training team. We also have our GPS Spring Facilitator training in May of 2024. We are going to have a supervisor training that is not listed here, but that is for anyone who is supervising support group facilitators who had been trained with the GPS model. We have our GPS Fall Facilitator training happening in October, and then our GPS certification opportunities that will be happening after every single one of our trainings. All of our trainings are online. We are always offering scholarships, so please don't let any financial struggles be a barrier for you. Please apply for a scholarship, email us, contact us with any questions. We'll be happy to provide any answers that you may need. We are also partnered with the Bureau of Substance Use of Massachusetts. So if you work in recovery in the state of Massachusetts, you may qualify for a free scholarship for to come to the training for free, and we are going to be sharing that application form as well. Please reach out if you need anything. Like Crystal said, these trainings are for everyone. You don't need to have lots of letters after your name. You don't need to have lots of degrees. All you need is the desire to support other people and also the lived experience that you have. You can do a lot of things and you can support a lot of people where you are with what you have and with what you know. So here's GPS to train you with the right skills to support people one-on-one or in a group setting. Just reach out and we can support you and get you in our trainings throughout 2024. Thank you, Crystal.
Thanks, Nelly. This is a little about our GPS curriculums and our manual in Spanish. Those are up on our website. You can check those out if those are of interest to you. And we're often working with communities and partnering with them to write their own custom curriculum for whoever they're working with. So that's another thing that we love to do with folks. And you can find out more on the website or by reaching out. So speaking of reaching out, here is some info. Please, please, please stay in touch. We love hearing from you. The website, here's our email, the info@Group Peer Support. And if you mark it for Crystal or for Nelly, it will go to the person. If you don't know who it should go to, you can ask the question and our team will route it to whoever it needs to go to. Social media, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. There's a newsletter and emails that come out about the upcoming trainings, about things like this webinar. And we're always, like I said, offering new things, coming up with new things, dreaming of new ideas. So the best way to get that information is to subscribe to the emails and get those emails from us. So we're going to move to questions here in a minute. But to wrap up this presentation, I want to read to you a couple of our GPS principles. And our GPS principles are things we believe are true for all people, because it's so important for us to remember that we are not just our wounds, we are not just our struggles, we are not just our traumas, we are also the things that make us strong. We are our resiliences, the things that make us wise, and we are all of the things that our community adds to us in so many ways. We believe that we each have the wisdom within to navigate our own lives when we feel seen and respected for who we are. We believe Speaking the truth about our experience is a revolutionary act that breaks silence, isolation, shame, and guilt for ourselves and those around us. And we believe everyone includes you and me, we believe everyone has the ability to heal and grow. Well, that is our presentation of all the ways that all the info you might need for launching your GPS group. Thank you for attending. We are going to open it up for questions. If you have any, I am happy to answer them. And yeah, you can put up your Zoom